Hey friends, this is Cass from Garden House Treasures. Thanks for stopping in. Today I'm going to be showing you how I make these little resin mushroom house jars using the silicone molds that you can get off of Amazon or Temu. So let's get started. So here's the mold. I got it off of Temu. You can also get it on Amazon if you're not a fan of Temu. Today I'm going to be using Naked Fusion Artist Resin, and I just put it in these little squirt bottles from Dollar Tree to make it easier. I've got my kitchen scale. I've also got Picasso alcohol ink in the color Manganese Blue. I've got some Let's Resin metallic mica powder in bronze. And I also have this Roxy epoxy mica powder in blue and some Cast & Craft opaque pigment as well. I'm also going to be using some antique white from Apple Barrel, and these are just some wipes I got from Dollar Tree, but I would recommend using probably some alcohol wipes. And then you're just going to need any old paintbrush. The smaller the better, I would say. So to get the details on this mold, we're actually going to go ahead, we're going to flip it inside out, and as you can see, have used this mold quite a bit. There's still some mica powder left on it from last time I used it, so I'm going to take one of my wipes and I'm just going to clean out the inside of it because I don't want any of that ending up on my finished piece because I'm using a different color. So I'm going to clean that up real quick. So I've got my mold cleaned up. I'm going to take my Let's Resin metallic mica powder in bronze. And all I'm gonna do is take my small paintbrush, and I want my door and my windows on my mold to be in this color. So I'm just gonna dip it in and I'm gonna fill in the indentations where the door and windows are with this mica powder. And I already know what you're thinking. You're thinking that this mica powder is gonna get all over the inside of the mold because it's certainly not just gonna stay in the indentations where we want it. But fret not, we will go back later with our alcohol wipes and we will clean up any unwanted mica powder. I wanted to go a little bit brighter for this mushroom house, but you can also use any color mica powder you want. Anything would look nice, just use your imagination. I think even just a basic brown looks really nice for the door and windows. It gives it kind of more that foresty feel, but use whatever color you'd like. Okay, so a lot of times I like to have the stems of my mushrooms to be the same color as my door and windows. So I'm gonna go ahead and take this bronze mica powder and I'm just gonna do the stems of the mushrooms on the jar portion of the mold. And you don't have to do this. You can do a different color stem if you want, or if you want, you could even leave it unpainted and have it be whatever color your resin is, and that will look just as good. Make sure you clean your hands and your area really well before moving on to any other mica powders or moving on to the next step because you don't want it getting everywhere and getting all over your mold. And now we're just going in with the wipe and we're just cleaning up wherever we don't want that mica powder. We're gonna do the big squares on the windows. We're gonna do the windows on the door, just anywhere that the powder got that it's not supposed to be, basically. We're just gonna be cleaning it up. So on the lid of this jar, there is a little mushroom sort of chimney. It just looks like a mushroom sort of growing out of your roof. And I want the stem of that to be the same color as the mushroom stems on my jar. So I'm going to go back in with my bronze mica powder, and I'm just going to brush that with the bronze as well. And I'm holding my mold downwards to try to avoid getting the bronze up into the mushroom part. So I have this Roxy epoxy, and it looks like I used ocean blue green, and I'm going to be coloring my mushrooms on my jar with this mica powder. This is a mica powder I just got with a beginner's resin kit when I first started resining, and it's just what I have now. So I'm just gonna go in. I want the mushrooms on my jar to be the same color that my lid is going to be, and I'm gonna be coloring my lid with alcohol inks in a blue color, so I'll try to get them as close as possible. But I'm just gonna do this with all my mushrooms, but only on my jar portion, because the one on the lid will automatically be blue from dyeing the resin blue for the lid. And of course, going back, cleaning up any unwanted mica powder. And this is what we're left with. Now, of course, in order to actually use this mold, we're gonna have to flip it back right side out. So I'm gonna be as gentle as I can possibly be flipping this back in. It's pretty much inevitable that we're gonna get some mica powder where we don't want it, and that's okay, because we're just gonna give it a good once over with our wipe again. We're gonna get up in there with that wipe and wipe off anything that got where it wasn't supposed to be when we were writing our mold. So this mold takes 9.5 ounces of resin by weight. I always do my resin by weight and not volume. And that's 5.5 ounces for the lid or mushroom top. And that's 4 ounces for the base or the actual jar portion. So I have 9.5 ounces mixed already in that jar. And I'm gonna pour 4 of those ounces into this other little cup, so that I'm separating the ounces I need for my lid from the ounces I need for my jar, because I want them to be 2 separate colors. I know you can't see because of the glare, but I did pour 4 ounces into this other cup here, which I'm going to set to the side and allow the bubbles to rise to the top. So this one's going to be for my lid. I'm going to take this Cast and Craft in opaque white, and I just want to put a little bit of this in there because I do want the top of my mushroom to be more opaque. I don't really care for translucent things for most resin projects. Some of them, they turn out okay if it's more translucent, but especially for these little mushroom jars, I prefer if they are more opaque. So I just added a little bit of the Cast and Craft. A little bit goes a very long way. And then I'll add in my blue. So I've got my manganese blue alcohol ink from Picasso, and I'm adding in a few drops, and I'm just going to keep mixing it until I'm happy with the color. And I'm working under a ring light. I would suggest, especially if you're working under a light, to bring your resin into different lights to make sure you're happy with the color before you decide to finish, because I have realized that in different lighting, the color looks completely different. I'm just adding more blue here and there, and I apologize. I didn't realize that I had gone in with a different blue color trying to get the color that I wanted, but I'm pretty sure what it was navy, also in the Picasso alcohol inks. So now I've got my Cast and Craft in opaque white again, and we're gonna go back to the resin for the base of our jar. And all I'm doing is white. I just want a white base, so I'm just putting a little bit of the Cast and Craft in opaque, and we're just gonna mix that up. Oh, Okay, so now for the fun part, we get to pour our molds. So I'm taking my blue and I'm pouring it in the lid portion of the mold. And I'm just gonna pour it slowly, make sure it flows into that mushroom chimney part up there in the top. So I've stopped a little bit short, and you don't have to do this, but I've found with this mold, at the rounded part, a lot of bubbles like to form under there. So I'm just going in with my craft stick and I'm just going to try and sort of scrape out the bubbles, get out any air bubbles that might have collected under there, just to try and minimize the amount of bubbles in my finished product. And then I'm just going in with the rest of my resin to top it off and make sure it's got that little ledge at the top. All right, so now we're gonna pour our jar, and I wanna give it another once over to make sure I don't have any unwanted mica powder where it's not supposed to be. I've definitely not double checked it before and ended up with a big splash of silver mica powder right in the middle of my product, and I had to toss it. There was no fixing it. So I clearly deemed it okay at this point, and I'm gonna pour in my white resin, and I'm not gonna fill this yet. I'm gonna pour in probably about half. And then what I like to do, especially with jar or box molds that have like a rim at the top, is I like to just lift it up, look underneath, and make sure no major bubbles have collected in that rim. Because if they have, it's gonna make it look like I have a chip in my jar, box, whatever. So I really try to make sure there's no air bubbles in that rim. And I'm just topping it off, and don't you just love it when you end up with that perfect amount of resin, which is why I told you guys exactly how much you need for this product. I hate having leftover resin. Of course, you can have other molds prepared just in case you have extra, but I just love pouring out those last few drops and having it be the perfect amount for my mold. And of course, came in with my heat gun here and popped some bubbles. I also popped a few with the toothpick. And don't go too much, especially on the lid, because the lid's a little bit of a deep pour and it will cure pretty quickly. So just don't hit it with too much heat on that heat gun, or it's gonna flash cure on you. Okay, my favorite part is demolding. I did not fast forward this part at all, so if you don't care to really watch the demolding, you can go ahead and skip ahead in this video. But this is my absolute favorite part. I think it's so satisfying. It's my favorite part of making resin projects. And at some point in the future, I hope to bring you guys a video of purely just me demolding resin projects. And maybe that's weird, but I think it's so satisfying, and just the best part is just seeing finished product, and it doesn't always turn out how you want it to, but it's still so much fun just peeling it out of that mold. I don't know, maybe it's just me. And then here's our finished lid. You can see that pop of bronze in my mushroom stem there. And the rest of it I just left blue because we're gonna paint the rest of this. It doesn't really work well to use white mica powders. It just hasn't shown up well for me underneath our other dyes or inks. And of course, just gonna demold the jar portion. And I usually like to just slowly peel away the edges before kind of just rolling back the rest of these molds. I honestly didn't think I'd end up using these molds a lot when I bought one of them, and then I made one for one of my craft shows and it sold so fast. I made a couple more for the next craft show and a bunch of those sold, so I was like, I've got to get more, so I got a second mold, and I've made so many of these. At my last craft show I had 6 of these little jars and I sold out. These are best sellers at my shows, and they are pretty cute, so I guess I can understand why. So I've got my apple barrel acrylic paint in antique white. Any white would be fine. This is just all that they had at the store. I'm taking a small sort of pointed paintbrush and just dotting away at these little mushrooms on my jar. And with the same paint, I'm going in with a wider paintbrush to paint these circles on the lid of my jar. And I try to stay in the lines as much as I can. If you go outside the line a little bit, don't worry too much. You can just grab your alcohol wipes real quick and just wipe up any edges that you actually went over with. And for the small dot on my lid, I went back to my small pointed paintbrush that I used for dotting the mushrooms, just because it's smaller, easier to stay in the lines with the small one, a little more detailed. And grabbing that small paintbrush again, we're just gonna go ahead and dot away at the mushroom on our lid, just like we did with the ones on our jar base. So apparently I felt that it was necessary to film myself painting every layer of me painting these dots on the lid. Totally not necessary, but I will just tell you guys I ended up using 3 coats on these dots to make sure they're nice and covered. I think I tried to do a technique where I go like vertical for one layer and horizontal for the next to see if it was better coverage. It wasn't, and it didn't look as good as the ones where I just went all the same direction, so I would suggest picking a direction and going with it. So I have this metallic paint in antique copper, which matches my bronze on my door and windows of my jar pretty well. So I'm going to take my small paintbrush with this metallic paint and I'm going to go ahead and use it for the little brick window that pops out of the lid. So this brick window is textured. It has bricks that are raised and bricks that are sunken in. And I just go ahead and take this color and I do it on all of the raised bricks. And it usually turns out pretty nice. I think it turned out nice for this one. I usually actually use a paint pen or paint marker to do this part, but I didn't have a paint marker in a color that would match my window and doors. And you don't have to match the window and doors, but I just think it looks nice, adds a little something, just something besides white to the lid. And for the front of this window, it's kind of hard to see the details in this video, but basically I try to do kind of every other brick on the front on the little archway portion. I'm so sorry guys, I know that my camera has been in and out of focus, it hasn't been the greatest, but there is this little cross or T in the middle of the window, there we go. Little T in the middle, so I usually paint that the same color as I painted a portion of the bricks. So we've let all our paint dry and now we have our finished little mushroom jar, and I think it turned out great. It's so cute. You can make this in so many colors. My favorite color to make this in is light pink or orange with a brown base. And I just love how this guy turned out. Here's your finished product. And I also have some other ones in here so that you guys can see some different colors. And like I said, these are best sellers in my shows. These make amazing gifts. Mushrooms are so in right now. People love them. So this would be a great little gift. The mold itself is not very expensive. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you learned something new today. Go ahead and like and subscribe if you want to. God bless. Have a great day.